Hello and welcome to the Memory Capsule Podcast, where we interview members of the Pokemon trading card game community. My name is Rafal Gladys. Each week we'll be speaking with our guest about their background with the Pokemon TCG, how they got involved with the game, and give them an opportunity to share their love of the game. Today's guest is Toine Lay, better known as Toine Lay. While Toine might be most known in the Pokemon community as the first Twitter that players go to check for translations of cards coming out in Japan, they are also a very talented player with incredible achievements. Toine splits their time between France and Japan and placed top 4 in the 2021 Aichi Champions League, as well as top 16 in the 2021 Japan National Championship. They've also achieved top 32 and 64 finishes at major events in Europe over the past year. How are you doing today, Toine?
I'm doing great. Hello, bonjour, and konnichiwa. Thanks for the perfect intro. That felt so great. I was so proud.
I always ask, is there anything I missed, anything you'd add, or was it pretty good?
That was perfect. I
Okay.
must say I'm a little bashful about doing my first podcast experience, but we're off to a great start.
Perfect.
You're
Yeah, I
saying
gotta
great stuff about me, so I'm very glad.
gotta start at the highest point possible.
Thanks.
So I'll just ask you the question we ask every guest at the start, which is just what is your favorite card of all time and why?
And you did tell me that question in advance, and I had maybe one full week to think about it, and I'm still not sure what will be my favorite card. So I think I'm just gonna mention the best card from every deck that got me a world invite in Japan.
Sure, go for it.
So my mind immediately goes to Buzzword GX, which was a very stupidly strong deck that got me my first qualification for Worlds in 2018. It was a very big basic hitting for big damage, weakness into the BDIF at the time. Really, really fun deck to play. That was my first big win a long time ago. So that's very funny because that's a Pokemon I really did not like the design of when I first saw it in the games, but I ended up loving the card because of how stupidly strong and how far it got me. I don't know if you've got any of these cards, like this Pokemon, where you don't really like them, but you have such great memories with the card that you end up loving the Pokemon just because of the memories with the TCG.
Yes, now I think it's great how with the TCG, a lot of cards that a lot of Pokemon that people might not think about, you can
Yeah.
build like an attachment to them. Like I have a big attachment to Electric, but no video game player likes Electric, you know.
Many video game players don't even know about Electric.
Exactly, exactly. But I think it's just the best.
So that's I've got this Pokemon which I just love because it took me far in the TCG. Same with Malamar. Like I wouldn't say I didn't like Malamar, but it's not like it was one of my favorite Pokemon. But after playing at the Japanese nationals and doing pretty great with the deck, now that when I see a Malamar, I'm like, okay, I know that guy, I like him. That's a Pokemon I love.
Is there a specific Malamar? Because there have been a few that have been successful.
I've always hated the Malamars that would accelerate energy from the discard because it tended to be strong against the decks I like to play, and I really like the Rapid Strike Malamar, which is the one that
Mm.
I think I might be one of the first players who got like a big event result with Malamar. It kind of made the deck a bit more popular, so it's a deck that's close to my heart because many people still associate me Tuan with Malamar, which I found very funny. So yeah, the Malamar is another card I love, and another card I love from that deck is the Oricorio GX, which was also in the other deck with which I got a good result when I played Mewtwo and New Welder attack team. The Oricorio was actually the MVP and the only one card that was shared across the two decks I played that
Mm.
year.
And they're reprinting a card with a similar effect, aren't they?
Yes, similar effect, higher HP, which is kind of necessary considering the power creep in the latest years, and probably much more usable attack
Yes.
compared to the Oricorio. Although I did take a few KOs with the Oricorio's attack
Oh,
back
really?
in the day. People would not expect that. They were so convinced the Oricorio could not attack when I used it as my main attacker against Urshifu VMAX or stuff like that. They were like, what? It can attack? Yes, it can. It does.
So that's a great introduction. It really kind of set the stage for a lot of your finishes, which we'll definitely get to. But maybe we can go back a little bit, and I'll just ask, how did you first get involved with the Pokemon card game?
Got first involved in the Pokemon card game when it released in France when I was 9 years old. So it goes way back. I kind of got into the TCG when Pokemon became a thing in France. I tried learning the game when the game started, but I really, really didn't find out how to properly play the game until many, many years later.
Mm.
So are we talking about like experiences like with the game as a whole, like even with collection stuff and childhood memories, or are we more like into when did I actually like start playing in competitions? Because that's we would skip a few over 10
um
years.
yeah, I think that's most players. They they collect as a kid and then they get into it way later. They never even knew how to play as a child. So
I think compared to most kids, I kind of had a pretty okay understanding of the rules,
hmm.
mostly. Just didn't know how to build a proper deck.
I see, of course. So, let's do a bit of both. Did you do a lot of collecting, and then like how big was Pokemon in France? Because I know I always like to ask international interviewees about that because in the U.S. I know it was such a phenomenon, and in Japan, but
Yeah,
I always like to ask internationally. And then, how did you first start
Pokemon
playing
was
competitively?
Pokemon was huge in France as well. Like it left a very, very big mark on like my whole life because of how big it was, and probably like same as pretty much everywhere in the West. Big hit, everyone collected. And I think I'm one of the kids who actually kept loving Pokemon even when it was not as cool anymore. Be it because the hype calmed down, or because like you're not supposed to like Pokemon in your teens, but like I just kept loving the franchise all the time. Maybe because I got to experience a bit of the Japanese side of the hobby pretty early. I ran into Japanese cards, so some Japanese manga. I could not read Japanese at all back in the day, just to be very clear. But like I kind of discovered the other side of Pokemon, like I discovered the second generation a bit early. I had access to some of the cards that had not been revealed in not released in neither French nor English pretty early. So like I've always seen Japan as the land where Pokemon live, you know. So like as a kid, and like I'm going into that the level of detail because that's kind of gonna lead into the rest of the story,
Oh,
I
go
think.
for
But
it.
very very early as a kid, I kind of found out about Japan through Pokemon, and from a very young age, I was fascinated with Japanese Pokemon stuff, Japanese Pokemon cards, and as an extension of that, with Japan, thanks to being a kid in the 90s who was kind of exposed to a bunch of Pokemon stuff. But then to go back on the subject of like competitive stuff, I think it was maybe around my 20s when I actually started playing in the tournaments. Like as a kid, I would go to Toys R Us all the time with my very poorly built 60 cards deck and try to win a few games. I might maybe win one in every 10 games. I had no idea how to build a proper deck because I would always try to build one like the Steam decks with those very, very stable 4 basic, 2 of the stage 1, 1 of the stage 2 lines, using 2 types with 0 synergy.
So then,
But
when
yeah,
you found like the competitive side, kind of what year was this at this point? Like what season?
I think we're talking around 2013, something like that.
Okay.
I wanted to build a proper deck, but I didn't really want to like invest the money. I would need to buy a playset of broken Pokemon catchers and stuff like that. So
Oh, of course, they were very
I
expensive.
waited until someone gave me the opportunity to borrow one of their decks to play at the French Nationals, which was really a pretty, I wouldn't say casual event, but like compared to what we have now, like it felt very, very like grassroots. That first French Nationals I played in, maybe there were 100 people in the room, I don't know. And I borrowed, I think, so it was Typhlosion Reshiram. So what year was that?
I think
Uh,
2012. That was actually my first deck. Actually, when I started
Oh,
playing.
really? Well,
Yeah.
it was also my first competitive deck, which I
Oh my
borrowed from
goodness.
someone and did terribly with. But although I lost that tournament very, very quickly, and in the afternoon they did a side event for the losers where we would only be allowed to play Pokemon with HP under 90, and I actually won that side event.
Hmm.
So that was my first big win at French Nationals side event.
You have to start somewhere, right?
And it felt good. Like I think I might have won like a box or half a box or something. Felt pretty good. Got my first taste of glory. But my first real like getting into competitive Pokemon was after moving to Japan
Hmm.
around 2015, 16. that's when like I was like, okay, cards are way cheaper in Japan than they're in France, so I might actually be able to build a deck. Plus, they're doing that campaign where you can participate in events where you play with pretty much a trainer kit.
Mm.
So you could just buy that stuff and build the deck you wanted with that, and face other players who did the same. So it was very very low entry barrier, very low entry cost. Plus, when I moved to Japan, I decided to not rely on English at all to socialize and make friends. So I decided I had to force myself to speak Japanese. So I would have to make Japanese friends. And at first, frankly, I could not speak very well at all. But I thought, at least I know the rules of the Pokemon card game. So even if we can't use proper language to communicate really well, we have like the rules in common. So that's maybe one way I could try and communicate and socialize with Japanese people. So that's what I did. And I try to like force myself to every week try and go to some kind of casual Pokemon event, and there are a lot in Japan, so it's pretty easy to find one.
So if you don't mind me asking, how did like what led you to move to Japan? Were you like were you studying, or was it just a choice to you wanted to try living there?
Just wanted to try it for the
Wow,
challenge of
okay.
it. As I told you, even like from a very young age, I was fascinated with Japan. And I'd been there maybe 2 or 3 times, just traveling for maybe 1 month. And like every single time I went, I just wanted to stay longer and longer. And for me, it always seemed like one of the coolest things you could do in the world to like go live in Japan and speak Japanese and buy a bunch of Pokemon and stuff in Japan.
Yes.
That's just something I always found like I've always dreamt of doing, and my girlfriend was also pretty down to try and do the whole expat experience in Japan. So we just decided to like try that challenge together, see if we stay a few years, and we ended up staying 7 years in Japan.
Wow,
So
okay.
I guess we liked it.
Yeah, seems like it was pretty good.
Yes.
So I guess I think one of the big questions that comes to mind for me is you've played in France, you've played in Japan. What are some of the big like similarities and differences that have stood out to you between the two different systems?
I might have a hard time finding the similarities apart from the fact they're using pretty much the same rules, and it's Pokemon card game either way. It feels so different playing in Japan and playing in France.
Mm.
Be it back then or now, even now, like Pokemon is starting to grow quite a bit in France. It's still nowhere near the level of popularity it's got in Japan. I think nowhere is close to how popular the game is in Japan right now. So in terms of, I think I could go on a 3 hour tangent on the differences between playing in Japan and playing anywhere else. Actually, I just came back from a few weeks traveling in Japan. I came back, I think, 3 weeks ago, and I'm still feeling a bit of backlash, like of whiplash. I mean, like thinking about how playing Pokemon feels in Japan and how it feels now that I'm back in France. I love playing with other French players, but like so much more complicated to like find an event, find people to play with. Whereas in Japan, you can just get out, walk maybe 10 minutes to a card stores or a bookstores, and you will probably find a store with an event going on and people to play with you.
Mm.
Like in Japan, you can, like when I landed in Japan last month, I didn't have the card I needed for a deck. I just walked into a store, and 15 minutes later, I had a full deck I needed to play the next day in a Steel League. It was just that easy.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the main difference for me is just how much Pokemon feels like it's everywhere in Japan.
I see.
I don't know if you've been in Yokohama for Worlds last year.
I was not, unfortunately, but everyone who
No.
went said it was it was just like a completely next like level compared to any other worlds before.
It felt like we were actually in the Pokemon video games, like in an actual Pokemon city where Pokemon are indeed the most important thing in the world. And like Japan is not obviously not like that everywhere all the time. Like Yokohama was probably the highest level of Pokemon hype you could ever get, but I feel like just by the sheer number of players you've got in Japan, you really feel like it's a very big deal. So it's
Mm-hmm.
actually very funny when I got my first CP in Japan this season this year. So they've got a completely different championship point system. It's completely separate for Japan and for the rest of the world, but they do have their championship point system. So yeah, in Japan they've got their trainers league, which is pretty much the same as a league challenge you would have in France or in the West, and you get CP for playing that. So when I played in one the last month, and I got my first CP, I think I was at maybe 10 CP or something, and I got to see what was my rankings on the CP leaderboards for the Masters League in Japan. So at 10 CP, I was, I believe, 24,000 in
Wow.
Japan. So that means there are at least 24,000 players who like actively play in events that give you championship points.
Mm-hmm.
We
Wow.
don't have 24,000 players in France.
Yes, yes. Because 10 points is that just like getting like a top 8 essentially.
That's like top 4 at a trainer's challenge,
Wow.
at a
And
league
there's
challenge.
24,000 players who've gotten that or better.
Yeah, or who have played in several events.
Wow.
But then again, it's so easy to like participate in an event in Japan because there are so many events. Like when I stayed in Japan, I got to play every single day. I had like several options for championship points,
Mm-hmm.
wielding tournaments every single day. We
So
don't have that in France. I have to plan way ahead. If I want to play in a trainers league, I've got to look at the schedule. Okay, we have one in 2 weeks. It's almost in Paris. I can be there if I take the train for 1.5 hours. Got to order my cards online and hope that they arrive within 10 days. It's really not the same experience.
yeah, for sure. So I think for a lot of players, maybe less recently, but for the longest time, it definitely felt like Japan was just this like system and this structure that we were just completely unfamiliar with, and maybe I'm mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong. I was under the impression that maybe you're like limited to how many like events you're able to attend in Japan in order to
Absolutely,
get your
yes.
invite.
Yes, that's right. It's very funny because I think twice weekly I get someone asking me to explain how it works in Japan. The expats are just players who are curious about how it works. So I think I can do a pretty good summary of that.
Okay, would you mind just
um,
giving us a bit of a short breakdown?
yeah, so short breakdown. You've got you know the very giant tournaments where they have like 3,000 masters. They call them the Champions Leagues. So these do not give any championship points at all. They are like the biggest events and everyone wants to play in them, but they do not give any CP.
Mm.
Which is good because you would think like with 3,000 seats for 3,000 masters, you would have like to be plenty of room for everyone who wants to participate. It's not the case at all. They do like entries through a lottery, and you've got pretty much a 20% chance to get to participate in any
Wow.
given Champions League.
I've always wondered how many players don't get to make it into those because I know it's a
Most of them,
lottery.
most of them. But actually, every single time you lose a lottery, that somewhat increases your chances for the next event.
Oh,
So
interesting.
the more you lose the lottery, the more likely you are to win the next one you enter.
Mm-hmm.
But like most people would only get to participate maybe 1, 2 if they're lucky, 3 if they're really lucky. But then again, players who like get good results at Champions League get qualified per default for the next one. Or if you win something that's a bit like a League Cup, that will give you your seat for the next Champions League anyway. So there are ways to like avoid going through the lottery system, but it's mostly lottery system. So it's a very good thing that those don't give championship points.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to get championship points is through city leagues, which is pretty much in terms of scale like League Cups. And you only get to play in 4 of those per year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they're like split in what they call seasons, which is a bit confusing because we would usually call a season a full year of playing. So let's call them quarters. So every quarter you can enter and play in one city league, and that's your chance for that quarter. And you also, yeah, that's pretty much it. You can get up to 30 points through some other smaller tournaments, and there's no limit on how many you can play at those, but you like cap at 30 CP. So the real big CP winning event would be those city leagues, and you get 4 chances per year. and you do not have the opportunity. Unlike in the West, you cannot just pay more to play more. You play
Yes.
as much as every other person.
Yeah, because I guess if there's
And
a big tournament every single night, every day, then someone could just go to everything, right?
yeah, you could just grind, but
Yeah.
you don't get to do that. And like they want everyone to get a fair chance to play in just as many events and to actually have the rankings mean something.
Mm-hmm.
Because like of course our ranking in the West, like they will actually show a player skill, but it will also show that players like kind of dedication to the game and how much time and money they can actually put into the game. In Japan, they've kind of removed that aspect of how much time and money you can invest in the game. Just you get 4 chances and that's it, and everyone gets 4 chances.
Hmm. Okay, I see. I
Which
see.
I find fair but harsh, especially when you consider the fact that those 4 chances you get is best of one tournaments.
Yes, I know that's a common thing that's been brought up. Um, I guess in that case, on that subject, my next question might be maybe like what do you see between the two systems that maybe kind of you think maybe one could learn from another? Like, is there anything from Japan that you really
Well,
wish our Western system had, or anything that the Japanese system would benefit from the Western system?
I really like how fair the Japanese system is in terms of everyone gets the same shot pretty much. They really made it in such a way that you don't have to travel far to actually do as many tournaments as you can. They actually started doing that during COVID because they didn't want people to just travel around the country. That's when it started, and they just stuck to that model because it's kind of fair to give the same chance to everyone. I just wish that chance was actually best of three or any other system that would actually like remove the variance and the luck aspect, because it's very hard when you see very good players not qualify for Worlds and not get the results they wanted because their one chance was on their unlucky day.
Yes.
So I guess, but the thing is, I don't think you could do that system of everyone gets 4 events anywhere outside of Japan, because it's really the density of card shops they have in Japan that makes that possible. We don't have that in any other country. So I don't think it would work at all. But to be fair, kind of like I like this season in France compared to the previous one, because this season we actually got to play in locals, which we
Mm-hmm.
almost did not get the previous season, which felt terrible for me. Like imagine moving from Japan, where you had like tournaments every single day, several times a day, moving from that to back to France, that your only opportunity to play for points is at regionals. That felt
Yeah, that would
so
be pretty
terrible.
tough.
And I think that season was tough for anyone, but it felt especially tough for me because it was my first season as a competitor outside of Japan, and I really didn't get to experience the most fun season as as the first one. So that season really felt very, very difficult, and I really missed how easy it was to access the game compared
Yeah,
to Japan.
for
And
sure.
still kind of fit that, but now we actually have locals, which makes qualifying for Worlds way, way more realistic. And that's actually one other big difference between playing in Japan and playing in the rest of the world. But that might be getting into a bit of a different subject. So I just want to make sure I did not forget to answer any of your previous questions before I move into that next point. Did I
No,
properly answer your
uh,
question?
I think so. I mean, I'm just enjoying the conversation, so feel free to go ahead in whatever direction you'd like.
So yeah, I'd say the one big difference, and I guess that will also get us into what should Western players learn from Japan and the other way around. What feels very different in Japan is that people don't actually play to qualify for Worlds, and I feel like people in France, probably all around the West, players in the West play for their invite for Worlds, right?
Mm, for
We all
sure.
have our little like CP count in our Twitter bio.
Yes. Yeah. I have that as well, so I definitely understand that.
And like it's pretty damn realistic when you play in the West to qualify for Worlds. Maybe it's pretty hard to get like a paid invite or a travel award, but like qualifying for Worlds, that feels like a pretty realistic goal if you like give yourself the means and if you've got the time and budget. Like that sounds doable. Not guaranteed at all, but definitely doable. For anyone who really set their mind to it, they have a pretty fair shot. In Japan, not so much. So I feel like in Japan, people don't play to qualify for anything. They just play because they love playing the game,
Mm.
and that makes a huge difference. Because when I would go and play in Japan, I don't go because I have to make my CP to get my invites. I go play because I want to play. It's just there and available. It makes a big difference for me. Just like I feel like the atmosphere wherever you play, I feel like the atmosphere of the Pokemon tournament is amazing and everyone is very cool. And I love being surrounded by Pokemon fans like me. But I feel like in Japan, like we're literally just here because we enjoy playing the game, and there's no like I'm here today because I'm trying to get my words. It's like no, and no one's like, oh no, I've got to make that I have that kind of result today, otherwise I'm not getting my invite. No, in the first place, no one's really expecting to get their invite because you've got 25,000 players and they have not even 100 people who go there for Worlds every
Mm.
year. So it would just be weird to play expecting to qualify for it. It would be weird to play aiming for the Worlds invite. You'll be very happy if you get there and you'll do your best to try and qualify for Worlds, of course. Like there are amazing players in Japan who like seriously are always doing their best and aiming for the Worlds invite, but they never consider it a given.
Mm.
I know a bunch of very good players in the West. They would be silly not to expect to qualify for Worlds, and they know it. So they know they're going to Worlds. Obviously, they'll do everything it takes to get there. And considering they're very good, it might not take them that much to get there. But in Japan, even the best player will never expect to qualify. They hope to qualify, which makes when you actually do qualify, it's a pretty damn big deal. I've seen players cry.
Yes.
Like, I don't know if you've watched the Japan nationals they had last weekend.
Yeah, I saw the finals.
Many
Yes.
players would cry once they had their invites
Mm.
like secured because it's just that big of a deal. You're one of the few among tens of thousands of players who got the honor of qualifying for Worlds. Makes it a very, very big deal.
That's interesting because I know just maybe even like a month ago there was a lot of discussion on Twitter in like the mostly like the North American community about should locals be kind of disincentivized, should regionals be the main way to get your worlds invite, should worlds be more exclusive, and it seems the way you're describing Japan kind of has everything that some of those people were asking for. But I do wonder, how that system would work in North America and in Europe
Mm,
when we don't have locals every single night, when locals don't feel as
yeah, but
rewarding. And I think a lot of players would have to shift their mindset as well. I think that
yeah,
might be
and
the hardest
that's the
part.
thing, right? We are used now to we feel entitled to awards invite as competitive players. And now that we've been used to that, I think the shift to a completely different system would be pretty hard. And to frankly, if we didn't have the big goal of the world invite playing in the West side, I'm not sure what would keep me going playing. So it's a weird way to say it, but like in Japan, it was just so easy to play. Like I love the game and I have tons of fun playing the game, but frankly, now that I'm in France and I'm not even I'm not far from Paris, but I'm not in Paris. It's always takes a bit of effort to go and play at league, if you see what I
Hmm.
mean. I
Yeah, I
barely go to league.
understand.
I just go to play two events that will get me towards my world invites. I wish I had a league close enough that I don't have to make a big effort to go play. I wish it was just as easy as it was in Japan. So I guess depending on where you live, you can really have that even outside of Japan. If you're in a big city with a bunch of different leagues and card game stores, you can really still get that experience of just playing for the fun of it. I feel like ever since I've moved away from Japan, I'm really playing for the competition for the invite,
Mm.
which I don't really enjoy personally. I feel like it's a bit of a shame that I shifted to that purely competitive mindset. And to try and go a bit around that, I'm actually considering doing a bit of a competitive leap year where I would just maybe play as a not play but be active as a judge rather than a player, just to
Oh, I
get
see.
one year where I'm not just always chasing that invite, which I know I'm going to get, but still stressful and until I get there.
Yeah. Yeah, so then you can still be involved with the community, but you don't have kind of the pressure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that kind of wanted to just ask about like the difference between like Japan and the Western systems is like, I guess maybe not the systems, but like the kind of the flow of like information, because it definitely feels like as like Western players, like Japan is like it always feels so difficult. For the longest time, it felt very difficult to like get information. Now we have some websites
Yeah.
that give us like city league results. They give
Mm-mm.
us, people start following like Japanese players on Twitter or following their
Yeah.
YouTubes. At least that's how I get that information. And
Yeah.
for a lot of Western players, it's finding some of these good lists and successful cards
Hmm.
before they get to us. But I
It
know it
used
was a
to be
lot.
difficult.
Yes, and I know in the past we'd get the sets even later now, because now we get sets maybe a month or two
Yeah.
after Japan. It'd be
Yeah. Yeah.
much
Yeah.
later before. Is there any like what is kind of the perception from Japanese players of the Western players? Do they look kind of at our results to kind of improve their decks or
Oh yes, they absolutely look at like big players and big tournament results in the West, especially now that we kind of have the same format for a considerable chunk of time. Like a few years ago, we would have such different formats; it wouldn't make much sense from Japan to look at the West too much. But I feel like lately, like right now, the format will be the same for NAIC as what it is right now in Japan. And like Japanese players like going into the Japanese nationals last weekend, I know Japanese players would look a bunch at online Western tournaments results because that was their format, and they knew there were a bunch of amazing players in the West that might have ideas that the Japanese players haven't come up with yet.
mm-hmm.
So it really felt like Japanese players were really looking closely at online Western results to serve as that kind of reference point for what to play for their big national events, which might also be because during that period before the nationals, they didn't have city leagues anymore. So usually they would like pay very close attention to city leagues events, which are those events I mentioned, that's your only chance to make championship points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they would have those like there will be a bunch of those tournaments every weekend, sometimes even during the weekdays if it's during the holidays. So like you would have a constant stream of CPY is very important tournaments results, and that will be their main source of reference to check how the meta is moving and evolving. But that stopped maybe 1 month before, just after the Sapporo Champions League, actually, and maybe 1 month before the Japanese nationals. So since they didn't have that anymore, they like turned their heads to the online Western event
Ah,
results,
I see.
sort of kind of that to see to find some new ideas, to get the data of what's winning against what. So I feel like shout out to Limitless TCG, which is definitely a reference for everyone around the world now, both ways.
For sure. Yeah, it definitely feels like there's a bit of like a flow of information in both directions now. Because I remember when I first started playing, I remember there was a player I think Asa Yuntunen, who
Yeah.
I don't think plays anymore, but he had like a blog where he would post lists from Japan
Hmm.
3-4 months before those cards even came out, and that was just the only way to get information. I remember
Yeah.
looking at that and
I
being
mean,
like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on
in,
there?"
in the past few years, gotten so easy to like refer to Japanese tournament results from the West. Like, there are a few things that really made that possible. First, the fact that now the City League results are automatically uploaded on the official website. So like the lists are like available the next day if everyone wants to see them. So the fact the decks kind of became disclosed publicly, that can kind of open the floodgates in terms of the amount of information you could get. I think the fact the in Japan and in the West are getting so much closer right now, that also makes like sharing of information much more relevant. Like before, it used to feel like, as you said, you are looking at the future, like maybe the format for like next year, maybe. But now, like you're
Exactly.
just looking at the format for the next big internationals, right? Whenever you're looking at the format in Japan.
hmm So then,
Um, yeah.
oh, I was just gonna say, so then maybe we can start talking about maybe some of your results in Japan, because you said you've played in Japan. You don't necessarily go for your World's Invite, but you've done pretty well for yourself.
Yeah, I kind of ran into my words invite by by accident.
So
the
the big one that stands out, and Limitless only has so many Japanese results. So if there's anything I'm like
Yeah.
missing about your results, please let me know. But the big one that stands out is obviously the top four at the Aichi Champions League. Could you maybe
To which I
guess?
would like to reply, which one? Because I did that twice.
Really? Okay, so yeah, because
Yes,
only one shows up. So,
I know.
um, could you maybe tell us about both of them? Tell us how those went.
First one was indeed the Champions League Aichi 2018. So I guess that's not the one that's on Limitless, is it?
No, the 2021
Nah.
is.
And 2018 was my first like big taste of victory,
Hmm.
where I played, as I mentioned, the Buzzwole deck with Lycan Rock, very fun, stupid, aggressive deck, which really fit my playstyle, which I discovered then. And yeah, I was not expecting to get a result like that. I think it was like I barely made top anything back then. It was my first big win, got my first trophy, got my first taste of victory. I was on the stream and all. I had my match broadcast on YouTube and Nico Doga. Like,
Hmm.
and for me, it felt that was a big turning point for me to like kind of tumble into that victory. Fun fact: top 8 on the tournament, everyone was playing Buzzwole Like and Rock.
Hmm.
Everyone was playing same deck, and back then, like the information would not move around as fast as it does now. So like, if information was actually moving around as fast as it is right now, you would have had maybe 50% Buzzwole and 50% deck that wins all the time against Buzzwole. You'd be surprised by how many people like actually not playing either the clear best deck or the very strong counter to the clear best deck. Like it was very weird back then compared to now. But yeah, that was my first big win. I think like when I say it was my first taste of victory, it was a turning point. I'm not kidding, because like winning an event like that in Japan kind of makes you a star for a few days. And back then I was still struggling to try and fit within the community as a foreigner who was improving on their Japanese but still not quite getting there. I felt like, culturally speaking, in terms of language, in terms of like making connections with people, I was still kind of an outsider. And like getting that win and being respected as a good player in Japan kind of like kickstarted and gave me a big boost in terms of
Hmm.
feeling like I belong and actually like deserve to be like part of these tournaments in Japan. And like people actually like recognizing me for my result and respecting me for my result, like that gave me such a big confidence boost back then. Like when I went to the Pokemon Center the weekend after that event, like staff members would like recognize me, and
Oh
random
wow.
people between the chefs would be like, "Is that Antoine Boulet?" That feels so weird, right? I was not used to stardom, and like I got that sense of belonging, and sounds very very wholesome, doesn't it? But thing is, that gave me the very very notion that my value as a person was dependent and it depended on my results in tournaments. So
Mm.
that was kind of the start of my very, very dark arc where I got like hooked on victory and would feel very bad whenever I lost in a tournament, because I felt like I had to keep winning to like keep being worthy of being part of that community. And it took me a while to get out of that mindset.
That's really interesting. And yeah, I think one of the big questions I always ask guests is like kind of the mental side of the game. Like, how did you work on kind of putting yourself in like a better mindset to when you approach the game?
Yeah, it took me a while to actually get out of that I have to win mindset, which is like extra stupid in Japan where you're playing best of one. Like there's so much that's not in your control that I feel like I was like, maybe for one full year I was very dumb and felt like I had to win, even though that's something I could not fully control. Like in the West, you'd have players who like you're not surprised to see them all the time in top at regionals. In Japan, you don't have always the same player. You have a few players who like win more than others, but you don't always get the same players who you expect to always see in top. Mostly because best of one gives much more variance, and like it does not reward skillful players as much as best of three, even though our best of three is not perfect right now.
Hmm.
Like I feel like there's like anybody will understand that playing only best of one like puts so much outside of your control. So it took me maybe one season of actually not doing as well as I wanted. Like my 2019 season compared to 2018 was just not not good. Like no, I was not satisfied with that, and I felt terrible not winning. But 2020 kind of like came around the idea that there's just so much that's not in my control. Like the only thing I can do is do my best to play as best as I can and have as much fun as I can. Once I finally managed to like wrap my mind around the fact that the only thing I can control is how much fun I have and how much effort I put into my training, but I cannot control the result, so I should not like focus on the result. I should focus on everything I do up to there and what I do during the tournament to like play as well as I can and have as good of a time as I can. But everything other than that, I should not feel bad if something outside of my control goes not the way I expected.
Mm.
And I actually like wrote a big article in Japanese explaining like that kind of thought process, how bad I felt when I felt like I had to win a tournament, and just how I started winning against once I gave up on the idea of having to win.
Yeah.
But like it's not like you have to stop like trying to win, or like you don't have to stop like practicing or doing your best. Just I think you must do your best to improve and do your best to have a good time, but that's how far your control of the situation goes.
Yeah.
Once sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think I've one of the big things that kind of helped me like improve my mentality with the game. I think it was a YouTube video by Jay Hornung, who's like a pretty veteran player from the U.S. So I don't think he really plays much anymore except for like retro. But he did like a little video about like the mental aspect of Pokemon. And one of the big things he said is like you should never get to the point where your results on like a weekend will affect your week. Like if you go
Right.
0-3 on a Sunday on a cup,
Yeah.
if that affects your rest of your week, you might have to work on something with yourself.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And there have been time in my life when I've been in that bad mindset where my results in the weekend will not influence just how I feel during the week, but like until the next event, which might be a month or two after. And but that's because like I had that terrible notion that my value as a person was linked to how good I was as a player, which is that's just if anyone listening right now is sometimes feeling like that, just realize that's just your brain playing tricks on you. Your value as a person is way more than how good your deck
Yes,
did
for
at the
sure.
regional.
Definitely.
But like when you start winning a lot and people respect you for that, it's hard to not like make that kind of your identity, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely can understand that. And it can get like very frustrating if like after
And
your first big finish, something goes poorly. But then it's like, how do you bounce back from that? Is the next big question.
And when you see those crazy good players that win several regionals a year, keep making top cut, and you're like, it gives you the impression that you're supposed to be constantly good and get constantly good results. But let's not forget we're playing a game with a big factor of chance in there, a bit of luck. So like if we wanted zero luck, we just play chess, but that's just mirror matches, and I find that boring. So I don't play chess. I like the luck and the variants and and the way we can express our play styles through Pokemon. But like they're still like even if we played best of 9 and we are all perfect players, there would still be a factor of luck in the game, and that's part of what makes the game fun in a way. Some people want to completely remove the luck factor in the game, but they should just go play chess. They'll have way more fun. Some people play both. But like there's variance, so it's just not healthy for your mental health and state of mind to like focus too much, give too much weight and importance to your results in that luck-based game compared to what makes you a good person and worthy as a person. There are many other things that makes you a worthy person, not just your results as originals.
Yes, exactly. And like you said yourself, there's a lot of other ways. Like if if you're participating in the community because you love the game, there's a lot of other ways to like be present in that and be a part of that.
Right.
If you're just playing simply to win, then you're gonna have some down points. Like you are going to lose sometimes.
Exactly. But like playing to win is fun as well, right? Like
of course I will. Yeah, I'm not gonna say you shouldn't try to win. I would.
Yeah.
But
you just shouldn't be too hung up on winning.
Yes, there's like a balance you can you can strike there.
Yeah, but like I'm not gonna pretend I'm not happy I got my invite, right? And I'm not gonna pretend I don't have more fun on events where I win compared to events where I probably.
Of
But
course, of course.
whenever I go to an event thinking I've got to win, I'm not gonna have a good time, and I tend to do more poorly when I like get in the mindset where I think I have to win. And that was kind of every single regionals for my first season outside of Japan, which was the season leading into the Yokohama invite. I was like, gosh, it's my first season outside of Japan. I have to prove I'm a good player in the West as well. They're doing Worlds in Yokohama. I have to qualify. It's like it's on brand for me to qualify for Worlds in Yokohama. I have to. And the only opportunities we got to qualify for Worlds was playing the regionals around Europe. So I would spend maybe 300 euros per weekend to go play in a tournament. I was like, I have to get my invite and I have to make that 300 bucks worth it. So I've got to win. And I had a terrible season. Not in terms of points. I did get my invite in the end, but I felt so terrible through all of it
Yeah.
until I got my invite. It was worth it because Worlds in Yokohama was amazing. But getting there, I was not having fun. I was like, I felt once more into that mindset of I have to win to prove myself, etc., etc. And that's just you would think I would have learned from the first time, but no, I've got to make the same mistake a few times to actually learn that
Yeah.
it was okay to like just enjoy the game for the just for the game.
But it's kind of like you said, like in Japan, there are more opportunities to play the game for enjoyment, and
Yes,
then in Europe and the
absolutely.
West, and
Yes, yeah,
I will say I'm in a privileged position because I have a locals that I'm able to go to every week that has like 20 or more
nice.
players every week. But
Yeah,
if you live in certain parts of the United States or just different countries, like it might just be cups and regionals, and then it's
yeah,
hard to not approach that and just be like, I need to win this because why else are you
right.
going there?
Yeah. So when all you get is that plus maybe playtesting on PTCG Live, like
Hmm.
like live is not a very good complement to
Yes,
a healthy PTCG experience.
that is true. That is true.
Yeah, so the thing is like now that so last month I went back to Japan and I made it so that if I won the lottery to play in Champions League, I would be there and play in the Champions League, and I got to play in the Champions League in Japan for the first time again in 3 years. And that like I got to re-experience every single part of the TCG as I used to love it and as I actually love it. But then going back to France, I'm like, yeah, now that I've like had a taste of the pure TCG experience I've actually loved for 7 years, kind of feel bad right now. Kind of want to go back. I had to force myself to go to a cup, even though I don't need the points anymore, just to like socialize with people and like remember that it's actually fun to be with people playing the game, even if it's a cup and I don't get to play like in a casual league as I would in Japan. It's not as
Yeah.
big as the giant tournaments in Japan. Like I had to force myself to get out of my my isolation. I think for 2 weeks I did not touch a Pokemon card. So I forced myself to go back to an event, and I had tons of fun, like meeting everyone again. So,
That's good. That's good.
but I think I'm still in a bit of a slump, thinking, oh, I just want to play in Japan again.
Yeah, you're making me very, very envious. I really want to. I would love to definitely experience that. I know a lot of
What's
players
stopping
when
you?
they went to Yokohama, they tried out Japanese locals, things like that, and I've
Yes,
heard very good things about all those experiences.
yeah. And like Japanese people are so happy to have like foreign players come and play the game with them. Like if it's like in big well-known players, like it's a big event. Like I know they're preparing a practice tournament before Worlds where they're gonna have Tordre Cleve and Fabien Pujol and whatnot. And like that's a big like fun event with stars. But even
Hmm.
if you're just a random player from the West and you go to a trainers league in Japan, they like players will be like interested and they will feel pretty hype about the fact there's a foreign player there. It feels a bit like playing Worlds at home, you know. But I feel like Japanese players are very, very welcoming to foreign players, so long as like you make the effort to like be like mindful of your manners and be kind with the players, like as the same as you would do in the West, really. But so long as like they see you, I mean, they're just happy to see someone like who loves the game as much as them and like will actually love the game so much that we for sort of actually trying to play a tournament in Japan.
Yes, for
I think
sure.
they find it pretty exciting.
So then, I guess my next big question would be like, when it comes to kind of the relationship between you playing in Japan and playing in the West, like you have over time kind of become the face of like translating cards on Twitter. I don't know at what point that kind of like broke over because I became like the main person because there's been a couple
Yeah.
like a couple different Twitter accounts, Twitter users
Yeah.
who are like the translators, and then it ends up on Poke Beach. But
Mm.
I know that over the last like year, I'd say or more, you've been kind of the main person. As soon as cards start leaking from Japan, everyone's just waiting for you to for the next post. How did that kind of get started, and how do you feel about kind of assuming that role in the community now?
Well, it's very funny how it started because like at first I would just send translation to Ross from PTCG Radio so he can do videos whenever a new card was announced or revealed. I really like his help a bit. So I would translate cards that were just revealed in Japan and send him the information by email, obviously. So he would have the translation. And at one point, maybe I should try that Twitter thing. Seems like it would be a bit easier to send him stuff. So I literally started sharing translation on Twitter because that was the easiest way for me to send translation to Ross Gilbert to help him make his videos. And yeah, that's literally how I got on Twitter sharing translation, just because that was more convenient than emailing Ross. And as to how I got into the position of being a main point of reference, I really couldn't tell you how we got there. It just kind of happened. I guess I was just there in Japan when cards were revealed, so it was easy for me to be one of the first to translate stuff. I guess I couldn't really tell you what made people prefer to use like my Twitter as a reference for translation rather than some other source, but guess we just got there somehow. Maybe it was because I made funny drawings as well, or sometimes I would share information on tournament results and whatnot. So like people with several reasons to be interested in the Japanese cards who kind of look at my account, and that kind of like built a bit of a community of people who like to get their information from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
As to how I feel about being in that position, I feel like very humbled, but I'm very aware of the fact that the day I stop doing it, it won't take long before someone else will take my place and do just as good a job translating cards. I don't know if you know that story about the rooster who thinks he's the one making the sun rise up. I don't
Oh
want
no.
to end up in that situation of thinking for a second that I'm the one making the translation. That I'm just the fastest one sharing the translation. Someone else will get there if I'm not
Yes.
doing them.
Do
But
you
I think
feel
that
any
just
sort of pressure to kind of get it done as soon as they come out, or like waking up in the middle of the night to get
kind of,
stuff
yeah.
in?
First, yeah, definitely, because now that I'm not in Japan, I have to get the translations done. But I'm also hyped to see the cards when they come out. And now I know that people are like expecting and excited for me to share the translation. So I feel like a bit of a responsibility. So even though I know someone else would do it, I know there are people who expect me to do it, and I don't want to disappoint them. And also, I'm always excited to see the new cards, and excited to see everyone talk about the new cards whenever I share the translations. I love whenever we have a new card or a new set that drops, I will spend maybe 10 minutes after that looking at the reactions, the retweets and whatnot, seeing people be excited about a new card or being super scared of a new card. I just like feeling the excitement everyone has, and see how alive the community becomes every single time a new card gets revealed. And I'm just happy to be able to help make that happen, even though someone else would do it. Clearly, if I didn't do it, I'm happy I get to do it. So that's what gets me up at 5 or 6 a.m. to translate the new cards when they come out. And yeah, maybe I feel a bit of pride in I want to be the the first to translate a card. Lately, Ross has been getting pretty good at Japanese, and we're kind of racing to
Oh
see who
yeah.
will get the translation first on our news Discord, Pokemon news Discord. And one thing I feel like I do better than the other actors in the translating scene is I like coming up with fun names for the attacks and abilities.
Hmm.
I could be even faster if I just skipped the attack names and abilities like many people do, and just gave the effect that would take me like maybe I think I would be like at least twice, if not 3 times faster if I just ignored trying to come up with a good translation for the attack names and whatnot. But I feel like that's also part of the fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I liked comparing what translation I came up with and what the official translation ended up being, even though it's not really a fair comparison because I have like 5 minutes to come up with a translation and someone is paid full time to do it.
Well, I
But
will say the one that really disappointed me recently when it released in English was the new
yeah,
Okie Dogie, because I think
yeah,
the translation that I was given was the attack was called Okie Punchy,
yeah,
and
that was
then
mine.
and in English it was called Good Punch, which made me very
Oh,
disappointed.
yeah, it's a shame because I think the attack name in Japanese was pretty much good dopanchi, which is good punch,
Mm.
but like not fun. Where's the fun in that?
Yeah, I got very excited about that attack name.
And sometimes I will like be a bit creative and go alliteration, and I expecting that probably they're not gonna like the actual translation is going to be not as fun. But when I see potential to be fun while staying kind of faithful to the original, I will sometimes go for it.
Yes, I like
But
that.
sometimes I will get stuck because there's a super weird, like they're using obscure words or there's a weird word play that like I can spend 10 minutes on trying to translate an attack name and I go, okay, well, people have been waiting for a translation. I was like, I've got to come up with something. Let's
Hmm.
call it Sumo Surge because I have no idea what they meant by Gotsuan Purify. Iron Hands was a hard one to translate, but I feel like the official translation is beautiful and they made a perfect job in many languages. Thank you very much. I would not have come up with that myself.
Yes, that one I think a lot of people were not ready for. Yeah,
but
I've been attempting to kind of learn a little bit from like the Japanese like the Note website, which is kind of like the article site in Japan,
oh
and like
yes,
certain
I
Twitters,
wish we
and
had that in English too. Like, no, that's such a good site.
I've been liking it, and I've been able to read some Japanese articles. I mean, we'll read. I just kind
Oh,
of I translate through my browser
okay,
just to kind of learn. And
yeah,
there is some interesting stuff that like the browser just simply doesn't translate. And one of the big ones was
yes,
like the Iron Hands attack. I kept seeing like use purify, and I was like, what does that mean?
purify.
I took me so long to figure out that it's MP very much.
Yes. So for everyone who's curious about how they came up with that attack's name, so it's Gotsuan Purify, and Purify being just amplify. Gotsuan is kind of sumo speech. So like sumo athletes have their very own like language, sub-language, the kind of words only sumos would use.
Mm.
And Gotsuan is kind of thank you or give me more, like when you had a good meal.
Oh, I
Uh,
see.
and I found that out through the Iron Hands card actually. So yeah, Gotsuan is like thank you, but like in sumo speech. And I'm
Gotcha.
pretty fine. So Gotsuan pretty fine. That's how you end up with amp you very much. It's very hard to like keep the sumo part of it when translating. Also, I do think my sumo search translation was not bad on that side of thing, but I kind of lost the thank you very much part of it.
Mm.
But
Okay.
yeah,
Well.
sometimes you can learn a lot about a language through Pokemon cards. Actually, as a kid, my first like point of contact with English was Pokemon cards. I started learning English through Pokemon cards, and I started learning Japanese through Pokemon cards later. Mm, Two of the three languages I know now I learned through Pokemon. I think we could say three as well because like my vocabulary expanded so much as a kid playing the Pokemon video games.
Mm.
Or even just the card games. Like what 8 year old kid is supposed to know weakness and resistance normally? Like
Yes, for
you.
sure. Um,
So yeah, there's always been like a very strong link between Pokemon and language for me.
for sure. And I think a lot of like international players I've spoken to have told me that like the cards and the games have just been a big source of like learning words, and even for
Yeah,
myself, like playing it as a child, like my vocabulary was definitely heightened by playing the games as a 7 or 8
yeah,
year old than beyond what
and
I what a normal 7 or 8 year old would be saying.
yeah, and I'm sure for many like non-native English speakers like me, like many people like found motivation to learn to speak English through Pokemon as well. Like I'm sure many players who do not need English at all for their everyday life still like try to improve their English to be able to communicate with other players at tournaments and whatnot. So I really find it beautiful, like how Pokemon and language can bring people together.
Oh,
Very
definitely.
cheesy thing to say, but
I mean, I think it's very true. Um, well, one of the kind of the last big thing I want to ask you before we start wrapping up is kind of the last big finish that that stands out that you mentioned to me when we were talking a little bit is not only the top four at Aichi in 2021, but the finish at the Japanese National Championships that
Oh
kind of
yeah.
followed that,
So
which
yes.
again because of Limitless, it's just because Japanese results, it's just very varied what's listed. So I don't even know about the top 16 at nationals until you mentioned it to me. But you went back to back from a top four at Champions League to a top 16 at a nationals during a time when all the events in the West were actually still shut down. I mean, I think I had
True.
maybe. I think my area had maybe we had to, it was like locals with masks on, I think is about as
Yeah.
far as we went, but there was no
Yeah.
official events.
Oh, but you
Um,
did have like local events like weekly league, or did you do grassroots events?
it was like a weekly league and grassroots stuff, but I
Okay.
again like I live in Chicago, so we have a lot of local stores, so we were
Okay.
able to kind of come back to playing a little bit sooner than I think most players in America.
All right.
But it was still very like local grassroots, like
I see.
few rounds a week type stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, like it was kind of weird how we kept doing events in Japan during a pandemic, to be to say things truly. I think the weirdest thing is that they kept doing these very premium pre-release events where you could get a super collector card for playing like just pretty much pre-release format tournament. And they like during like the peak of COVID at the beginning, they did an event where you could go and play and maybe win the Charizard VMAX Rainbow Rare, which you could only get that way in Japanese, which is worth like several grands.
Oh, interesting.
And someone thought it was a good idea to do that during COVID. But yeah, regarding tournaments in Japan during the pandemic, like many things to say about that. In a way, I was actually supposed to leave Japan way earlier than that. With my girlfriend, were thinking of maybe staying 5 years max. And when we were starting to plan on moving away, that's when COVID started, and we decided if we're gonna get stuck somewhere, might as well get stuck in Japan. So we stayed in Japan for a bit longer, which gave me the opportunity to play in the Aichi Champions League 2021, which gave me my chance to once more get top four placement and get a Worlds invite. Considering the previous time when I got top four at the Aichi Champions League, I did get my invite, but I also got a job in Japan at the very same time, and I had to decide between going to Worlds and starting my new job. And I did not go to Worlds at that time,
Mm.
even though I would have been the first non-Japanese person to qualify as a Japan representative at Worlds. I was like, I've got like, it was so hard to find a proper job, a non-teaching job in Japan. I've got to prioritize doing that, and maybe I'll get my invite some other time, I thought. And then for 3 years, I did not do that. So like, but thanks to the fact we stayed a bit longer than we'd planned, I got to play once more in the big Champions League, and I somehow managed to get a top four finish that time with Mewtwo and Mew tag team, which got me my invite. Also gave me an invite for Japan Nationals, in which I played. And the timing of Japanese national very, very, very bad for me, because my girlfriend and I were planning on trying to go back to France for a few months to see our family for the first time in 2 years. And for that, we had to get vaccinated. Problem being that the vaccination campaign in Japan was very, very late compared to the rest of the world. I will not get too deep into that, but Japanese government was a bit late. We were taking measures regarding that. We had an opportunity to get vaccinated through my girlfriend's work because she worked in a public school. So teachers through that, not even a public school, actually a private school, and we had the opportunity, her and me, or plus one, to get vaccinated. Problem being that the vaccination could only take place on the second day of Japan Nationals. So when I learned that, it's like I was, before that I was so hyped to get, like, I consider like that would be my last chance to play in a tournament in Japan, because we knew we'd be moving pretty soon, as soon as we could. And I felt like that would be my last event in Japan. I was so hyped to play in Japan Nationals. when I learned I would have to choose between playing that big event or get vaccinated, that was a very, very hard choice to make.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked into the very detailed schedule of the tournament. Wait a minute. I could get my slot to be vaccinated late afternoon on the Sunday and play until that time, right? And the main goal at the Japan Nationals was to make top 16 to get the day 2 World invite. So it's like, there's a world where I can actually get my cake and eat it too. There's a world where I somehow managed to qualify for day 2, where there's 64 players, beat my first opponent, make top 32, beat my second opponent, make top 16, get my day 2 World invite, get away, drop the tournament, and go get my shot. Which is somehow exactly what I did.
That's very impressive.
So yeah, qualified for day 2 of Japanese Nationals. I was playing the Rapid Strike Malamar deck. I was on stream for top 64. Managed to beat my opponent, made top 32. Managed to beat my next opponent, got top 16. I, as a staff member, so I got my day 2 was invite, right? And it's okay if I drop here. It's not gonna be too much trouble in terms of organization for you guys. That's fine if I go get my shot. And they were like, yeah, sure, not expected, but you can do that. So I got to do the epic mic drop of saying, okay, guys, I could play the rest of the tournament and maybe win it, because when I'm looking at top 16, I was pretty favored in terms of matchups. I could do that, but I'm going to get vaccinated because that's more important. See you guys at Worlds.
I mean, at the end of the day, you got the invite, you got the day 2, and you have a chance to kind of be responsible. So,
be responsible. I got to go back to France and see my family first time in 2 years. And back then, I had many Japanese player friends who were a bit hesitating about getting the shot when they would get the opportunity. Not because they were too afraid of, they weren't big conspiracy theories and whatnot in Japan. People were just afraid of being sick for one day and miss work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's how responsible they are towards their jobs. Sometimes to a fault. I had friends who were like, I don't know if I should get the shot. I'm afraid I get a bit of a fever and I couldn't go to work tomorrow. And I was like, I literally skipped top 16 of Japan Nationals, which could have gotten me a travel award to get vaccinated. I think you can take the risk of maybe having a bit of a fever for a few hours and maybe need to take a sick day. Is that going to help, maybe put a bit of a stop to that pandemic that's preventing us from traveling around the world?
Yes.
So I feel like I was able to make a bit of a cool statement when I announced to everyone that I was dropping from top 16 to go get vaccinated.
Yes. Yeah, you had a bit of the fairy tale ending. You get the finish you want, you get to do what you want with your girlfriend, and then you get to go home to France and everything. Sometimes everything does just work out in your favor.
Yeah, it was weird how well that worked out. I felt very blessed.
So as we kind of start wrapping up, in that case, do you have any events you're planning to be at that people might see you at? Do you have any shout outs, or is there any people can contact you?
My next event is going to be Worlds, I think.
Okay.
Because obviously I'm not playing in an AIC. I mentioned how I don't like to be in the mindset that I have to win. And trust me, if I had to spend $1,000 to get to go and play in a tournament, I would not be able to be in the proper mindset and not be focused on just winning to make it worth it. So I don't think I would have fun going to an IC that could cost me so much. So I would not be playing in an AIC, unfortunately, even though everyone expects me to for some reason. Everyone thinks I'm playing in every IC, and everyone thinks I'm playing in every single Champions League in Japan. That's not the case. I play in one IC every year, and I play in maybe one Champions League every 3 years.
Yeah, they all think you're always in 2 places at once.
Yes. Although I do hope I manage to make playing in Champions League a yearly thing. I would really love to be able to do that somehow. If you want to help me with that, I have personal shopper service I'm doing every time I go to Japan. I do the personal shopper. You can look me up. If you've got rare cards you're looking for your Pokemon cards collection, I can look for them for you and send them to you from Japan next time I go there,
Oh,
and that will
interesting.
help me pay for my next trip to Japan to be able to play in a bunch of Champions Leagues.
Okay, I might have to look into that.
Look me up, personal shooper. It was so much fun doing that last time. I had like 30 people asking me to find their favorite Pokemon, and I made like a bit of a mystery pack only with cards they will love. And
Hmm.
so far, I've got only like good feedback from people who are super happy with the card they got. So that was fun to do, and that helped me pay for the trip. So win-win. But yeah, next event you will see me is Worlds, because I will be going there, even though it will be a tournament when I'm like, oh, that's a lot of money. I really have a good time and maybe win. I will try my best to be in the mindset of just try to enjoy the event. And even if I don't perform well, I will try to perform well, but I will try to not hate myself too much on spending $2,000 on an event where I don't win. But I will try to win, but I will mostly try and have fun.
Yes, try to enjoy it as much as possible. It's a nice
Yeah.
location, and
It's
I'm sure
gonna
it'll
be
be a
my
lot of
first time
fun.
in Hawaii, actually, so I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, I won't go too much into details of how I feel about being a tourist in Hawaii right now, but we'll try and focus on the fun Pokemon stuff.
Yes, yes, yes.
And as for shoutouts, should I shout out to there's this kid in Indonesia, Eli, who's an American kid who's living with his family, and he just won the senior category, first place. He's the senior champion in Indonesia. They just had the nationals,
Hmm.
and that kid is amazing and managed to get another trophy and get the win. And I'm very excited to see him and his dad in Hawaii. So
Oh,
shout out to
nice.
them, to Eli and his dad. I guess I will give a shout out to Stefan, everyone's favorite Stefan Ivanov, who's going to. I was about to say try, but I'm pretty sure he's gonna get his third NAIC win next weekend.
Oh, all right. This will be posted after NISC, so we'll have to look
Okay.
back.
Okay, so shout out to Stefan for winning NAIC a third time. You did a good job. And yeah, shout out to all of my friends who will be traveling to the States to play in that big and exciting event. And shout out to everyone who will be meeting in Hawaii for Worlds.
Perfect. All right. Well, Tuan, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you to Tuan for being so generous with their time. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. If you're interested in hearing more conversations like this one, please consider giving the podcast a follow, review, or rating wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on social media, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at memcappodcast. Or if you want to see me post about my own TCG experiences, you can follow me on Twitter at RZGladys. Hope you have a great day, and thank you for listening.